As investor confidence returns to the Nigerian market, the Nigerian Stock Exchange says it expects to see the current market rally and improved regulation lure up to 20 companies to list in 2013. Now, the Nigerian market has seen only a few IPOs after the global economic meltdown began. Now, joining me in the studio to discuss this is Kayode Akindele. He's a partner with 46 Parallels. Now, great to have you in the studio once again, Kayode. Certainly happy New Year. I don't know if you've been in the studio this year so far. IPOs on the stock exchange. The NSE seems quite optimistic about it. They say 20 companies might be lured to the exchange in 2013. What's your take? Too optimistic?
I think it's very optimistic. They expect 20 IPOs this year after the lull we've had. I think it's optimistic. I think we will see some IPOs this year. I think if we get up to 10, the exchange will have done well. But to expect up to 20, I think is optimistic.
Right, and of course I want to ask you, the kind of returns we've seen this year on the exchange, do you think it set the stage for the telecom operators, the power sector companies, and certainly the oil sector companies to want to list on the stock exchange? I mean, we've been talking about new listings on the stock exchange since last year. They seem reluctant. What is your take?
I think this still needs, the exchange and the regulators need to do some more work on transaction costs. I think transaction costs are a big impediment. I also think liquidity in the exchange has improved. It needs to improve more, especially for the bigger companies. You have a situation where someone like Dangote Cement lists, and it's quite a big listing, but it takes a larger extent of the exchange. Mm-hmm. So I think more has to be done on transaction costs and as well as on liquidity.
Right, and I guess it's something that has been discussed a lot by the NSE specifically, the NSE CEO. He mentioned the fact that the regulatory environment isn't enabling, and he of course challenged the government to create that enabling environment that will encourage companies to list. Now, do you think the environment right now that the government has set is enabling for those companies who want to list on the stock exchange?
I think we're getting there. I mean, the government announced some waivers on certain taxes. I think no more needs to be done on that front. But I think the government is listening, and we're seeing some regulatory moves to try and make that easier. I think also the NSE, by introducing market makers into the exchange to improve liquidity, I think that's encouraged more people to do. I think what we need to see is for more of those big telecom companies, oil companies who are listed in Nigeria, and you might need more of a fillip from the government to push them towards the exchange.
Now, still on the issue of regulation, I mean, the NSE did introduce quite a number of guidelines last year, this year as well. What are your thoughts of the NSE as a regulator? Do you think these new guidelines are helping the situation?
I think they are. I mean, if you look at the NSE and where it's been the last 2 years, and before the crash in 2008, 2009, NSE is markedly different. I mean, new leadership reporting, new regulations, there's more confidence in the market, and you're seeing new innovations like market makers, both for retail bonds as well as equities, which is encouraging investors. And that's why you're seeing a lot of foreign investors coming into the market. Now we need to encourage more domestic investors through mutual funds and the pension funds to invest in equities. But I think we're getting there.
Right, and certainly you seem quite positive that when it comes to the issue of IPOs and listing this year. So which companies do you see listing? The telecoms, power sector, you know, we're going through our power sector privatization process. The oil sector companies, who do you see coming onto the market?
I see the power sector, it could be interesting. It depends when the handover of the discos and gencos happen, but they have to raise a lot of capital, because not only have to raise capital for the acquisitions, but also for the development plans, which they have to agree with the government. And a lot of that's going to come from banks financing, but some of it could come from the equity market. So you could see one or two dip into the equity market. Maybe not in 2013, it's a bit early, but maybe by 2014. A number of the oil companies might come in because a lot of the marginal fields, especially if PIB is passed, a lot of the marginal fields need funding for that. A lot of them going to the banks at the moment, but a lot of them could see limited listing in the stock exchange to raise capital in that sense, because as the market confidence increases, valuations are getting better, and companies are more confident that they can raise capital at a good valuation from the market.
And certainly, I mean, the macroeconomic picture looking quite good as well. Foreign reserves, you know, going up. And certainly, one thing that was announced yesterday by the Minister of State for Finance is the fact that we're going to see the sovereign wealth fund increasing the seed capital over the next 3 years from 1 billion to about 5 billion. I'd love to get your take on this. What are your thoughts on this?
I think anything that increases funds to the sovereign wealth fund is good, because it imbibes a saving and investment culture, which we need. 5 billion sounds like a big number, it is. But if you look at what the sovereign wealth fund was set to do, anything above the benchmark price is supposed to go to the sovereign wealth fund. There's not supposed to be any excess crude account. They're supposed to replace the excess crude account. But to try and run some kind of middle ground where you have still some funds in excess crude accounts where there's very little accountability, and then you have the sovereign wealth fund, I think you have to come to a conclusive decision. Now you have the state governors arguing about the constitutionality of the sovereign wealth fund. That argument has to be sorted out once and for all. We either go to the Supreme Court and get a ruling, or we amend the constitution some way so the sovereign wealth fund happens. You can't have every 6 months there can be some confusion about the constitutionality of the sovereign wealth fund. It doesn't help anyone.